selling your case, so to speak. The marketing aspect, the realities of, there are lots of attorneys that will do your case. They just want big money. There are other attorneys who say, yeah, they like it, but their schedules are full. Check back, that kind of stuff. But moving forward, so you have to deal with identifying the situations of your case. This is something that every attorney does. So, here it is. You got to bring this out at that understanding level. How do you market this? How do you sell it? How do you get the money that you need to be able to do what you have to do? Because anyone evaluating is going to be looking at a lot of things, including what we're talking about right here, right now. So, when we're talking about an overall scope, and the scope is we've got a bunch of Trump musters, Trump supporters that have repeatedly violently attacked, burglarized, stolen computers, stolen hard drives. We're talking hundreds of hard drives. We're talking an archive. We're talking artifacts, rare artifacts. We're talking stuff that is identified constitutionally as incredibly historical. Items that repeatedly have identifications respective to understanding of insurrection and various other laws, acts of war, that are included in the articles and in the Constitution. Many of which, by the way, I have to mention this, come with the death penalty. So we're talking archive, vast area with many cases, including civil rights cases. We have material pertaining to national security at large levels. That's been stolen. That's been damaged. These areas actually have charges way above what happened on J6. You can compare insurrection stuff on J6 and say, yeah, they were actually trying to overthrow the government. Yes, that's actually way up there. You could push that at an end and say there should be the death penalty there. But that having been said, you have people that are trying to say, well, they didn't really steal much of anything. They didn't, do this or that. But some of that apparently did occur at certain levels. But at the levels that it occurred with my archival interest and interfering with the candidate are way higher. Way higher. So we're talking far more overlapping charges. We're talking generally a minimum of 3 overlapping charge types, classifications that come as a punishment level, death penalty. So this is important. So problems with the case are the reality deals with much more. Since there are multiple cases, many other cases, there's far more to it. There's a much longer history, a calendar that predates, something that actually explains part of the evolution of hate, the evolution of the problem that we've seen manifest on J6. It did not just pop up like all of a sudden it's a fluke. No, this is something that has been an evolution, ongoing. This has been evolving, make no bones about it. So the evidence of part of this is in the archive. So there are previous items. We've got 29 vehicles current, 14 RVs, mobile broadcasting units, campaign units, archival units, and basically stolen, destroyed. So this is mind-boggling, and the judicial system does not want to respond. FBI gets an idea of who the theoretical players might be, and how dare you try to gather evidence against our good man Trump? They hang up the phone. Repeatedly, there's a version of this. The term they would say that they don't give a flying F. Now, if we break out the thesaurus here, we break out the thesaurus and say, code-wise, how many dozens of ways can you say something that's a blow-off, that's a complete blow-off, that means basically the same thing? In short, we don't give a flying F. Or do they? Or in fact, do they? Flip side, they do. If they do, then where does that put everything? How does that involvement get? Are any of them accepting cash from opposing parties? That automatically puts it into a completely different series of possibilities. So among these things, this is also something that's happened. So if we go to prior fleet attacks, there's a prior fleet attack. We have 4 RVs lost. We have over 1,000 hard drives that were stolen. We have over, I believe, over 10,000 DVDs stolen. These are data. These are data discs. This is not like, oh, it was a wonderful movie library. That would be separate. We're talking about the data disk. We're talking about key research material, lots of notes, lots of law pulls, lots of key items in legal research. This is enormous. We're talking about expensive reference books. We're talking books that cost $5, $6, $12, $2,000, $3,000. Very expensive reference books. And some of these books, of course, are crucial to running things like campaign, having key reference lists, key books that show you whose business is who, and what are the right phone numbers and the right addresses and the right subnames of people to communicate with, to do business. People don't believe it, but Google generally does not have what you're looking for. You'd be amazed how many times Google doesn't have the key business contacts listed. This is a lot more research to come up with that. And if you want to get lists to them, you have to pay. You have to pay for these lists. These cost money. These are lists, these are books, these are softwares, these are expensive. So the loss involving material, and again, classified, the earlier one is also a major classified information hit. We're talking a lot of data from custom lab research, a lot of it. The value to this is worth enormous amounts of money at an international level. We're talking, if you says, well, who would buy such a thing? And if someone said, would the Russians pay cash for it? The answer definitely is yes. So that having been said, would industrial companies pay money to get a hold of this data? Again, the answer is yes. So this does go into that copyright and patent area yet again. So very classified information, high-end research, high-end analytics, very classified information aspects. So into this you have, what are the problems? These are almost all items of clear violence, which means they're criminal matters. This is the eyebrow lifter to attorneys immediately as they look at the information, and their heads are puzzled because they're looking at criminal cases. They're looking at this and they're going, this is criminal. There's a case where the previous fleet was taken from private property. It was an illegal seizure. And you read through the case in a complete series of fabrication of lies. They tried to claim that, well, the property wasn't permitted for it. It was. They're saying the property never had water on it. It did. The water company interviewed says, we're not going to lie for these people. That piece of property was one of the first pieces of property developed. It was utilized. It had power poles installed. It was utilized as one of the original sales properties for the entire area more than 40 years ago. And that was at that time, so that would be, like 50 years ago. So they're like, we're not going to lie for these people. We have plenty of information of what the install order was, and there's an ancient install. Very first line of water coming in went there. These were actually, this piece of property was the primary office that developed the entire region. So the more you look at this evidence, you're going, everything these people are saying is a fabrication, is a lie. And you have people say, oh, well, we don't think there was anything about you. Just old RVs and junk. Well, the video and the photographs and the various witness statements don't come anywhere close to that. The visitations from attorneys that came out to the property to deal with some other situations. Other people who participated in archival research, a lot of other things. Civil rights lawsuits, data stored in the archive. So the evaluation exceeded easily more than $10 million. You got a walkthrough video, boom, there's $10 million in assets. Just one of these RVs has more than $10 million in assets in it. So it's like one RV is worth more than all the surrounding developed properties. It's worth more than the next 4 houses around it combined. Everything's there completely legal. Yet they lie. And be they research and you finally peg them down, and it's like, oh, well, actually, yeah, there was a fire, and we don't know what the original zoning was. But there's copies of existing zoning from other people's paperwork who reposted. And so this is, and other supportive data, the water company's original paperwork. So what these people did is horrible. So an illegal seizure occurs. Harassment case, lies, a seizure. Completely illegal seizure. Law says you have to inventory everything. No inventory. These parties refuse to do inventory. No inventory. So these people go, not only illegally seize it, they haul the stuff 150 miles away. Outside the district. Outside the county. Another violation. So you have attorneys that look at this and say, I don't understand, this is ridiculous. There's no inventory on this. They pulled it outside of the district. But both of those are criminal violations. So this is opposing force, opposing parties that attacked. Because apparently all these people are listed with one party. When you try to get assistance, the part of the problem is this is the police involving themselves as organized crime, as parties directly attacking participants in the process of election, directly attacking candidates, directly attacking archives. So you go to the higher authority, you have to end up jumping up. You jump up all the way to the state. The state is supposed to be the stopgap. Number one, the Secretary of State is supposed to be in charge ultimately of protecting the process of elections. If you need action, you request for an action this day. So paperwork delivered to the same line, the same communication line from the governor's office requesting action this day is addressed and gets action. A candidate puts in paperwork and the Secretary of State refuses to take action, refuses to respond. Attorneys look at this and they go, that's not right at all. That's a violation of oath. You can't do that. You just can't do that. So now you have a series of looking at government personnel, even at the highest level, one after another, after another, after another, in dereliction of duty. Acts of war have been committed against a candidate. Acts of war, as defined by the Constitution and Articles. National security has been violated. You look more, you research more. The federal government has given massive disclosure involving the discovery that Russian activity has happened in the region, that they were underfunded, that their policy was to end certain other investigations, yet they uncovered yet again even more information than they could pursue, and that they had partial information on parties, and that additional investigation needed to continue, and that the parties were also intruding upon local elections, state elections, which means there's also a federal authority question. So the end note on this closes with, these parties are still at large. They are still active. They are still involved, and they are still a threat ongoing to the process of elections, regardless whether it is a federal or state level. Federal, state, or local level. So some attorneys are afraid when they read all this. They don't know how to deal with it. So then we deal with, how do you have evidence? What's the evidence? So attorneys tell you, your life's in danger. You have to record everything that you do. This goes way back. So all these recordings involving all these phone calls, all these other communications, all these screen captures, digital captures of communications going through emails, all the email copies, all the other companies' records. Because why? You've already verified things. Chronological order, way, way, way back. You have parties that start violating your civil rights because it dates back to other events. There's other events. Straight out harassment of a candidate. Cop pulls you over and says, I'm going to write you a ticket for no plates, no tags, no insurance, no driver's license. Is this lunacy or what? This is lunacy. So here you have a vehicle that another state investigates and says, well, number one, all taxes were paid. That's on file. They were current. All tabs were paid for. That's on file. That's current. The plates were issued and paid for. That's on file. That's current. The driver's license on file, current. Insurance on file, current. On and on and on. And so you have Arkansas investigate this and says this is complete and utter BS. And they investigate and say, yeah, this guy filed candidate paperwork out of the state capitol. This guy's a presidential candidate. What's going on here? They make a call to California. California says they don't want to prosecute, nor do they want to extradite. So Arkansas's position is, if you get the person into the state, we'll immediately prosecute them. If you can get this person into the state or coming into the state, you bring us word that that person is going to come into the state, and you have a date and a time, we will have forces to immediately take them into custody the moment that they set foot into Arkansas. And we're not kidding. We're not kidding. You can find a way to get this done. Maybe a warrant bounty team can help you. There are those who do perform services. You just contact us with the location and the time, and we'll coordinate with you. We will take them into custody, and we will prosecute these police officers and prosecutors to the fullest extent of the law. So this is the case as you're looking at the various elements in the evidence. You have the IRS. The IRS investigates repeatedly over years and says, we personally asked, they seized a vehicle from you. As far as we can tell, it's an illegal seizure. You indicated that you have written records, some of which would be necessary for your taxes. We demanded to inspect the vehicle personally and check it for records. These parties refused us access. They refused to cooperate with our investigation. The conclusion of our investigation in a nutshell is these parties violated your civil rights. They violated an array of laws. And we will not lie for these people. And as for your tax situation, don't worry about it. We understand that there are, and this is later added on, that we now have verification of multiple instances of illegal search, seizure of documents, whatever they may be, because these parties clearly, in our investigation, did acknowledge that there were materials in the vehicle and refused to allow us to simply inspect, to do a raw inspection. So we are utterly convinced that you are telling the truth and they are not telling the truth, and they have something to hide. This is the IRS. So now you have other players that were involved that tried to verify things. I believe we had actually several attorneys, I'm not sure where the references are on them, also verifying things. So we have the justice system casting dispersions about their conduct and practices right upon itself. Their own actions doing this. Something that was be considered almost unheard of. But that simply is the truth. That is the case. So as the case expands, there's a longer chronological order that indicates other blacklisting, other illegal activity, other agencies, other research that indicates that there were other lawsuits, parties that caught them red-handed, various entities including the state, and they settled out of court and wanted to hide the information, not have it go public. Which of course brings about the question, how is that in the public's interest if information involving the discovery of blacklisting operations is not made public? How is this in the best interest of the citizens, especially when you have other victims? So this is definitive information. Now we have in the case the ultimate backup, fMRI lie detectors. fMRI lie detectors work great for willing witnesses. You're a willing witness. You are willing to tell your story truthfully. And there is no conflict in the brain. There is none of this somebody's brain is trying to lock up and not recall things in a fluid flow manner. So you could give somebody as many pharmaceuticals as truth serum. We've gone a long way, by the way, since World War II, since sodium pentothal, truth serum. Mind-boggling. So a willing witness, you can fill them full of pharmaceuticals, put them in an fMRI lie detector, and you're going to be able to calibrate them faster, and they're just going to flow. You're going to see all these key areas of the brain working in a completely different series. Let's call it flow, in an open flow. You get an unwilling witness, and these parties are going to struggle. You're going to see all these anomalies in the mind, all these things. Because when you start to get people freewheeling on information, you start talking about it, people naturally reference things in their mind, even images, recalling things, because as they're listening to a story or a narrative, they're going to recall a recollection. Parties that are liars and are trying to withhold information show a signature pattern completely different than willing witnesses. So it's pretty easy to see that parties are lying. Parties are trying to cover things up right away. So you can administer even more and more pharmaceuticals. There are instances involving that. Serial killers, other people out of Florida, different state areas where you fill them up full of pharmaceuticals and eventually they can't resist. And then you get the flow coming out. You get the association. You get the recall of images. And you start getting the fragments, recovering the fragments more and more and more as calibration continues. And you get those association points to other pieces of evidence. So we have other technology that also comes into play. We have SAR technology. Now, SAR technology has been around for many, many years. The past 20 years, it's been extremely high resolution. We're talking down to a blade of grass. We're talking 30 frames a second for the past 20 years. If you want to go back 50 years ago, what was SAR was a different story. You're talking 8 frames a second. You're talking limited areas of the planet that were being looked at for security or strategic or intelligent purposes. Now you're talking about, for more than the last 20 years, all the major cities, everything's recorded. So, you've got prior to 2000, I would call 2008 the big difference. Because when you get to 2008, you're talking the big, huge, mega changeover beyond the shadow of a doubt. Massive overlapping material, massive overlapping evidence. So you can track a blade of grass. Some of the devices do 60 frames a second. You got European satellites do that. You have overlapping. You have areas, California, for instance, New York, other areas. You have multiple satellites recording exactly the same material at exactly the same time. So this can get you hundreds and hundreds of frames per second. This can get you looking at angles of people or vehicles where you're now getting effectively 90% of an object recorded in full 3D, right down to the size of a blade of grass. You can even tell the color. If it's a blade of grass, you can tell the color, the shade of color of the blade of grass. This is done through reworking the data. The raw data captures the way everything works, except for a few key areas on the units which generally have dual coupling for localized intelligence. But that's a different resource. But the recording of all data is all reworkable. You can recalibrate, you can rework it, you can deal with it. And it's permanently recorded for all time. So anything like a speeding ticket that could show that, oh, you weren't speeding. Anything that has to do with physical location basically can be addressed with SAR if there's a physical location question about certain things. So this is really, really important. This basically means that we have all kinds of information. We have information about people who were in the process of moving things. Things were scheduled, and all of a sudden you have parties illegally coming up and stealing stuff, stopping parties in campaigns from moving their assets from one location to another. No excuse. Completely, massively illegal. So you have all these different things, and then you have the violent attacks. You have other things that date back further and further and further. And you have this long pattern and series involving discrimination. You have California asked about, why are you transmitting false records across state lines? Number one, they're using government equipment to put false information. That's a felony. Then they're transmitting across state lines to other parties, perpetuating. It's another felony. When you do it to a candidate, it's a different type of a felony. When you're doing it to an archiver, that's also a felony. When you're violating national security, again. When you're jeopardizing archive operations, again. when you're jeopardizing archiving of historical artifacts. And again, these charges overlap again and again and again. They're irrefutable types of items. You have Mueller and Russia investigation evidence. You have Mueller law teams with the legal teams that he runs privately, assessing some of the material involved, and they're saying, yes, that there are various things that are wrong with it, and we have information on file that we're not supposed to discuss, that's been reviewed before, that's in investigations. So the question is it worth pursuing? Definitely worth pursuing is the answer. So there's a limit to how far they can disclose items, but the hot and cold item asking direct questions, because you can't sell somebody whether, if they say, is it worth pursuing, you cannot say, no, it's not worth pursuing, when you know there's firsthand evidence there. So they would handle the case, $80,000. So that's for some of the other items related. So what we have is Russian-sourced money. We have Russian activity. We have Russian doxing. We have Israeli Mossad verifying, following Russians in the United States on a different related investigation, discovering that two of the agents that they're following all of a sudden start doxing a presidential candidate, me. So this is an incredible item. The anomalies overall are, there's such powerful evidence that points to the Donald Trump camp. It's pretty much irrefutable. Yet why are people in government squashing it? Why are leaders refusing to protect evidence involving parties who are working with Russian-sourced money, who are associated, respectively, as a camp attacking, committing acts of war against another presidential candidate? This is by far, it actually is overall the best evidence on the board, because it's treason evidence. The importance in understanding treason evidence means what? It means the rules are different. When you go into court, their attorneys cannot lie. They're not allowed to lie. They cannot put a false narrative together, or they will be charged with a crime. They must confess all knowledge that they have concerning their client and concerning their client's guilt. Treason law is a completely different area than other areas of law. This is very important. The entire protocol dealing with these types of cases is completely different. The examples of what's been happening in Florida and Judge Cannon, those are charges that deal with a lower level. They're not treason law. That case never would have been allowed to proceed forward with the bullshit that's been going on if it was a treason level charge case. So here we have over here, stepping back into the case, we have cases, multiple cases, stronger evidence, the highest standards. Yet we have the Secretary of State of California not cooperating. The AG's office not cooperating. And if we go back in chronological order, we're looking at multiple offices connected to who? Connected to Harris. Again, not cooperating. How can people claim, and how can she claim she's standing up to prosecute forward, the Trump counter situation, when she herself is a participant, at the very least, of dereliction of duty, of not only perpetuating the prosecution of false cases against another candidate, but refusing when direct evidence shows that these officers that put forth the cases have violated a series of laws. And that the evidence, the so-called citations, are complete rubbish. They're complete fabrications. Accompanied with the other evidence packages that go up with this, her office refuses to prosecute the police officer in question. Yet she takes money from parties that are setting up running for president as a candidate. This candidate, me, has declared that I'm already running for the White House for 2016. And then the day after the election, illegal impounds and attacks occur again on me. What are people to think? The problematic problems of this, as other attorneys look at this and realize and straight out say, there's a serious problem here. You have massive evidence, and you have parties that are supposed to be protecting evidence. They're supposed to be protecting the process of elections, and that's not what's happening here. This is mind-boggling, because you have to wonder who these players are. What are these statements they're claiming to be fighters? We have all these certain Democrats claiming that they're fighters, but when you check records, there's zero investigations on Russians, even though they're told, yeah, here's some Russians. We even have names. Here you go. Here's information disclosed at large. And we are certain that they are continuing their activity. Certain. No investigations. Who are these leaders? Why are they saying something different on the podium publicly? These people are grandstanding. They're liars and they're grandstanding. When the voters need protection, when I, a candidate, want to get information disclosed to the public, and I'm being blocked, and I'm getting zero cooperation from leadership to step out and get involved with the truth. Why are you protecting a few police officers, a few agents that have been busted red-handed? Now, as time moves forward, it just gets worse and worse and worse. 87 convictions, agents and police officers out of California, primarily all south of San Francisco. Bottom half of the state. Mind-boggling. With additional references that indicate for every party that they convicted that there's an additional 100 participants. That means 8,700 police officers and agents that have participated knowingly and involved themselves in activity that would come with an array of charges. We're talking about a situation of repeated attempted assassination on a candidate, me. Several attempts, 2 attempts by gunfire. I've had 7 attempts over the course of my life, so you have to get shot at once to at least become part of the club. I publicly showed 2 descriptions of what some of these situations were like. Having high-powered rifles so powerful that they're literally shooting the car out from underneath you. It's extreme amounts of power and around. Having windows explode on you, glass embedded all over your skin, your face, your hands. hand arm. So this is the complexity of how do you work forward with a sale when you have attorneys that are afraid. State bar, year and a half, over almost two years of listing, no results. Only ambulance chasers and data extractors. They want to know all about your case, but they don't want to handle it. They have no right to extract information on your case if they're not going to handle it. And we don't know who these are. Here's the bottom line. We have no idea who these people are. Someone's going to call you on the phone from a reference from the state bar, and they want you to turn over crucial information involving dates, times, and people's identity. What is this? Who are these people? You have no idea who these people are. None. It's a pull order. It's open as a general pull order. The party could even be a Russian agent. We don't know. It was an open pull order. Anybody could have pulled it. It's despicable. An entire state bar has no one to stand up and protect the Constitution. The nation is in jeopardy. We are in a state of emergency. And this is the status here and now, in a brushstroke, of where these cases are. Michael Crosby for POTUS 2024.